The mystical lies within each of us, and joy is our shared birthright. So join me, Dr. Shimon de Valencia, as we explore the esoteric, the eclectic, and the mystical baths born of our shared search for meaning and the joy that they can bring with each step we take along the way.
The Principia Discordia is a spiritual treasure that usually only comes to people's awareness when it is passed secretly from mouth to ear. And yet it is a surprisingly recent work whose influence is very widely felt, even if the teachings it contains and its importance in the history of modern spirituality is very little understood by most people. The Principia Discordia was first published by Greg Hill, who went by the name Malaclips the Younger, and Kerry Wendell Thornley, who went by the name Lord Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, as well as others. And the first edition was, according to myth, allegedly printed using George Garrison's Xerox printer in 1963. The first edition led to the second edition, which was published under the title Principia Discordia, or How the West Was Lost. This was a limited edition of 5 copies in 1965. The phrase Principia Discordia is, of course, reminiscent of Isaac Newton's 1687 Principia Mathematica. And its stated meaning is the principles of discordance, or discordant principles, the ideas underlying discordia. Now, Discordia is, of course, the Roman name for the goddess Eris, but her meaning in Roman mythology is different to her meaning in Greek theology, though there are intersections. Discordia in Rome, as representing disorder, was seen as a dangerous goddess, whereas the goddess Eris is a primal goddess. And rather than being a goddess of discord, of fracture, of competing forces, she is the goddess of the chaos, the void in English. Certainly, the Principia contains within itself its own justification. And certainly, as the book gained ground, usually through illicit copies passed secretly, people handing around very early photocopies or copying down the text into Ronios and then passing them secretly one to the other, the book did spread and its influence grew among a certain generation of people, many of whom were to become important in the emerging neo-pagan movement as the 70s progressed into the early 1980s. The Principia describes the Discordian society and the great goddess Eris, as well as the fundamental basics of what it saw as the Poi denomination of Discordianism. This seems to have been a feature solely that existed within the Principia itself. It features a mixture of typewritten and handwritten texts, which are intermixed with clip art, stamps, and seals appropriated from other sorts, as well as created by the framers of this important document. They were, of course, to go on to create the very, very famous Create Your Own Conspiracy Kit, and represented an expression of politics that lent towards nonconformity and yet gave expression to a spiritual vision. While the Principia does have many literal contradictions and humour, much of it dark, but humour, it does every now and again break into passages which propose that there is in fact an extremely serious intent behind this work. On page 75 of the Principia, the reader is told, if you think the Principia is just a ha-ha, then go read it again. And the first time you read the text, it is a little overwhelming. There are so many messages, but they're also robed in the humour and the eternal philosophical contradictions and the questioning of reality as it is. But much as we watch a film and think at first we don't like it, and then watch it again a bit later and go, oh, I actually do like this, the Principia is very much like this. The more you read it, the more you get it. In the language of the Church of All Worlds and of Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, you begin to grok. The Principia did enter popular consciousness with the publication of the 1975 science fiction series of books, the Illuminatus trilogy, which was written by Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson. It is important to know that Wilson was not directly involved in writing the Principia, but Robert Shea was. And so much of the mythos, including the framers of the Principia, are enshrined within the Illuminatus trilogy. And one of the ideas that goes within both the Principia and the Illuminatus trilogy is that there is a mysterious brotherhood whose name is the Bavarian Illuminati. And the framers of this text spent a lot of time and effort to promote this idea outside of the Principia as part of their Erisian agenda of stirring the pot, of shaking the beehive, and then seeing what happens. There's certainly some unique ideas that are contained within. The symbols within the book include the apple of discord, the pentagon, and the sacred hail, which of course by Discordians or Erisians gets turned into the sacred cow, and the joke is not lost. And this, of course, is put together to represent the Taiji Tu of Taoism. This is the traditional yin-yang symbol. But where there are two dots in the black and white section, these are depicted by the Hodge and the Podge. That is, by the apple of discord and the pentagon in their respective areas. Saints within the church include the Blessed Emperor Norton, Yossarian, Don Quixote, and Bacorian. And the list of saints increases as each person who becomes a Discordian or Erisian also becomes a pope, and thus they are able to make people into saints. But there is a long tradition in Discordianism, born in the Principia Discordia, of embracing the nonconformists, embracing the questioners, embracing the heretics. And in this, the deeper philosophy of the text would find no disagreement, because, of course, in Greek, the word heresos, from which we get heretic, means one who chooses. And within the framework of the Principia, this very principle of choosing is fundamental to our perception of existence and the way that that perception warps us, pollutes us, diverts us from achieving freedom or enlightenment. The text was reproduced in 1975. It was published and remained in publication until 2006, when the producer Lupanix, who created the very famous yellow cover of the Principia, went out of business. However, there are publishers still producing this text, but there are also copies that are spread around via PDF, and there will be a link to one of these in the description of this video. So what are the fundamental principles of the Principia? Well, the Principia Discordia holds to three core principles: the anaristic principle, order; the eristic principle, disorder; and the notion that both are mere illusions. In the Principia itself, it says the anaristic principle is that of apparent order. The eristic principle is that of apparent disorder. Both order and disorder are man-made concepts and are artificial divisions of pure chaos, which is a deeper level than is the level of distinction making. With our concept-making apparatus, called the brain, we look at reality through the ideas about reality which our cultures give us. The ideas about reality are mistakenly labelled reality, and unenlightened people are forever perplexed by the fact that other people, especially other cultures, see reality, inverted commas, differently. It is only the ideas about reality which differ. Real, capital T, true reality, is a level deeper than is the level of concept. We look at the world through windows on which have been drawn grids or concepts. Different philosophies use different grids. A culture is a group of people with similar grids. Through a window we view chaos and relate it to the points on our grid and thereby understand it. The order is in the grid. That is the anaristic principle. And this is where the Principia moves into eloquent post-colonialism. Western philosophy is traditionally concerned with contrasting one grid with another grid and amending grids in hopes of finding a perfect one that will account for all reality and will hence, say unenlightened Westerners, be true. This is illusory. It is what we Erisians call aneuristic illusion. Some grids can be more useful than others, some more beautiful than others, some more pleasant than others, etc. But none can be more true than any other. Disorder is simply unrelated information viewed through some particular grid. But, like relation, no relation is a concept. Male, like female, is an idea about sex. To say that maleness is absence of femaleness or vice versa is a matter of definition and metaphysically arbitrary. The artificial concept of no relation is the eristic principle. The belief that order is true and disorder is false or somehow wrong is the aneuristic illusion. To say the same of disorder is the eristic illusion. Thus, as the Principia points out, whether we view something as representative of order or truth and another of disorder or untruth, this does not relate to the actual nature of existence. This is a choice, and it is a choice we impose upon the world. And by imposing it upon the world, we frame the way we see the world and interact with each other. And we force that view on other people because we do not have a common frame of reference, because we choose to see the world as being truth or untruth. Now, this analysis is possibly one of the most succinct and beautiful analysis of the failings of Western religion, Western philosophy, or even Abrahamic philosophy, where there is this view that if we can find the true meaning of a text, that will give us a window into truth and reality, and thus holiness. This, from an Erisian point of view, is a perfect illustration of why you should not choose. By choosing this, you refuse that. By choosing that, you refuse this. Does this philosophy stand on its own? No. Within Vajrayana and within the pre-Buddhist Burn tradition, so the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, especially in the Nyingma tradition with Dzogchen, but also in the Kagyu with Mahamudra, as well as the Dzogchen tradition of the pre-Buddhist Burn tradition, there is this radical view that the very structures by which we impose meaning upon the universe are that they're imposed. Even the ideas of enlightenment and non-enlightenment are of themselves innately insane. They are choices. They are, in fact, the bars upon the prison by which we imprison ourselves. And by imprisoning ourselves, we imprison others. And so the spirituality that emerges out of this Dzogchen view, especially, sometimes called the Great Perfection, but also the Mahamudra tradition to a lesser extent, but still leading in that direction, is that the purpose of spiritual practice is to see existence as it is, without grasping, without accepting or rejecting, simply to perceive what is. And this is not an innately natural thing to do for many of us, because we have habituated ourselves to make these choices, to see things within a hierarchy of truth. And thus, the Principia Discordia does give voice to possibly one of the most radical forms of spirituality that humanity has produced. It also contains within it elements of Taoism and, to a lesser extent, Shinto. But what is truly amazing about this text is that it came to these conclusions in 1963. And the philosophy remains largely untouched right the way through to the most recent publications. Yet the Dzogchen teachings and Mahamudra in 1963, 1965, even 1975 were not being transmitted, were not being taught, and most certainly were not translated as such. That revolution was really not to take off until the late 1980s, early 1990s, and definitely in the 2000s, when Dzogchen is widely discussed and has entered popular discourse. Yet this text explored this. And in that, the question of whether Discordianism is a parody faith becomes a rather inane and misjudged question. Yes, it started out as parody, but does that mean it is no less valid? Because to say parody and humour are not spiritual qualities which lead to revelation and attainment of enlightenment is to say that seriousness is the grid by which you measure all existence. And the history of the Middle East and the West, I think, represent a wonderful illustration of why this seriousness is in truth a form of dysfunction, and that indeed there is truth to be hidden in humour. Even the Buddhas laugh, and even demons fart and reveal their own enlightened nature. The text did make appear. So in 1978, a copy of the work, which was from Kerry Thornley, titled Principia Discordia, How the West Was Lost, made an appearance in the HCSA JFK collection. You can find it under document 010857. Researchers into this, most probably Adam Grotley, who's author of The Prankster and The Conspiracy, which his work is really well worth reading, said that this copy was not a copy of the first edition, but was a later and altered version containing some of the original material. In an interview with the researcher Brenton Clutterbuck, Glarty said he had been given Greg Hill's copy of the first edition. And this appears in its entirety in the book Historia Discordia, a book on Discordian history which was released in spring 2014. And in 2015, Golightly stated that, in fact, he now believed that the copy in the JFK collection was in fact an earlier draft of the Principia, which predated its first edition. The Principia includes a notice which purports to disclaim any copyright in relation to the work. In fact, it says all rights reversed. Right spelled R-I-T-E-S. Reprint what you like. Regardless of this legal notice, which is seen as Holy Writ amongst Discordians, the Principia is widely disseminated in the public domain, and more traditional print publishers continue to put it out. Some republishers have claimed copyright in relation to additional material they've included in their editions, but to a great extent, the large amount of it, which they wouldn't tell you, is in fact public domain because it was created to be public domain. This, above all things, is an act of resistance to order, to established religion, to bring back the revelation of Eris. And if in doing so we have to go through some discord, so much the better. So, in its mythology, in Discordian mythology, Eris is described as the sister of Eris, the Roman goddess Discordia. And whereas Eris is the goddess of disorder and being, Eris, or her Roman version, Harmonia, is the goddess of order and non-being. As it says in Dogma 3, History 32, Cosmogon, in the Principia, in the beginning there was the Void, who had two daughters. One, the smaller, was that of being, named Eris, and one, the larger, was of non-being, named Aneris. The sterile Eris became jealous of Eris, who was born pregnant, and started making existent things non-existent. This explains why life begins and later ends in death. And to this day, things appear and disappear in this very manner. The names of Eris and Aneris, who are given a brother, spirituality, are used to show the fundamental principles of psychometaphysics. The anaristic principle is that of apparent order. The eristic principle is that of apparent disorder. Both order and disorder are man-made concepts and are artificial divisions of pure chaos, which is a deeper level than is the level of distinction making. To really get this book, to grok it, it's important to read it, and to read it. First go through, then go back and read it again. Because as you read it, it, much like Jung's The Red Book, reprograms the way you think, reprograms the way you see the world. You come out of it, each time you read it, a little less conditioned, a little less controlled, a little less likely to impose upon existence your own preconceived notions. And once you have done this, and you have ceased to impose order or disorder upon the universe around you, you wake up to a world of wonder in which each moment is a revelation in itself. And in this it could be argued that the Principia Discordia is a form of materialistic gnosis. I certainly recommend that, if possible, you get a physical copy, because the book is so unique and constructed so uniquely that the way you encounter each page is in itself an adventure, and the full effect is best given in a copy you contain in your own hands. And who knows, you may in fact be blessed with a revelation, non-revelation of the great goddess Eris, and in your wonder you will praise Discordia.